Listen, in my 300 cycles of teaching combat techniques to various species across 17 galaxies, I have witnessed countless displays of physical inadequacy. Truly, the universe is filled with beings who think they understand kinetic force distribution, leverage points, and gravitational manipulation. They do not. But humans? Oh, humans are special, and by special, I mean spectacularly delusional about their own limitations. My name is Voroth 9, and I am what you might call a martial instructor at the Galactic Defense Academy on Station Helix 7. My exoskeleton is reinforced durasteel. My reflexes are precisely calculated by quantum processors embedded in my neural cortex. I have trained warriors from the Krellian Empire, the Xiphoid Collective, even the notoriously aggressive Thrax clans. I have broken bones, shattered confidence, and rebuilt soldiers from psychological ruins. This is not cruelty. This is education. When the human arrived for advanced combat certification, I barely glanced at her file. Species, human, planet of origin, Earth, previous combat experience, minimal formal training, mostly street fighting, and something called Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Height, 5 feet 6 inches in their archaic measurement system. Weight, 135 pounds. Laughable, really. Absolutely laughable. She walked into my training hall wearing their standard issue academy jumpsuit, brown hair pulled back in a simple tail, eyes the color of old Earth oceans, calm and unremarkable. Her name was registered as Kira Voss. No honorifics, no military rank, no family legacy of warriors, just another soft-worlder trying to prove something in a universe that would chew her up and spit out the bones. "You are Voss?" I asked, my translator converting my clicking mandibles into something her primitive auditory system could process. "That's right," she said, not even bothering with proper formal address. Humans and their casual disrespect for hierarchy never cease to amaze me. "You're Voroth 9. The instructor." "I am Instructor Voroth 9, and you will address me as such," I corrected, circling her slowly. My 8 legs made barely a sound on the training mat. "Tell me, human, why do you believe yourself capable of advanced combat certification, when your species has only recently achieved basic space travel?" She shrugged. Actually shrugged, because I'm here, and I need the certification to join the Forward Scout program. "The Forward Scout program," I repeated, letting my amusement leak into my tone. "The program designed for first contact scenarios with potentially hostile species. You understand that the mortality rate for scouts is 47%. "I do. And you understand that this certification requires you to demonstrate combat effectiveness against multiple opponents, including instructors who have been doing this for longer than your species has had written language?" "Yeah, I got the brief." She stretched her arms above her head, joints popping softly. "When do we start?" The audacity, the sheer unfiltered arrogance of these hairless apes never failed to astound me. I had consumed trainees larger, faster, and more naturally aggressive than her for breakfast. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Station regulations frowned upon actual consumption of students. "We start," I said slowly, "when I determine you are mentally prepared for what is about to happen. This is not your Earth, with its padded floors and referees, and rules about striking faces. This is combat as it exists in the real galaxy. Brutal, efficient, unforgiving." "Cool speech," Kira said, rolling her shoulders. "Heard similar things from 3 different instructors this week. Can we skip to the part where you try to break my arm and I show you why that's a bad idea?" My anterior legs twitched in irritation. "Your confidence is matched only by your ignorance, human." "Very well, we begin with standard assessment. Attack me however you wish. Use any technique from your homeworld. I will evaluate your skill level before we proceed to actual training." She nodded, taking a stance that looked almost competent. Knees bent, hands up but loose, weight distributed evenly. Someone had taught her basics, at least. Not that it would matter. "Ready when you are, instructor," she said, and the way she emphasized my title dripped with sarcasm. I lunged forward, testing her reaction time. My right foreclaw swept toward her, midsection, not at full speed, merely fast enough to challenge a beginner. She pivoted smoothly, letting my strike pass through empty air, and countered with a low kick toward my rear leg joint. Interesting. She went for structural vulnerability rather than trying to match power. Smart if ultimately futile. I absorbed the kick, my reinforced joints barely registering the impact, and swept at her legs with my middle appendage. She jumped, tucked, rolled backward across the mat. When she came up, she was smiling. Smiling, as if this were entertainment. Not bad for a first exchange, she said. Want to actually try now, or should we keep playing tag? My patience, which spans approximately 300 years of disciplined training, began to fray at the edges. You believe I was attempting full effort? Human, I was assessing your baseline competency. Now I will show you the difference between your species and mine. I accelerated, my full combat speed turning me into a blur of chitin and calculated violence. I feinted high, struck low, came around with a grappling claw designed to lock joints and hyperextend limbs. Standard technique flawlessly executed, impossible for most organics to counter. Kira dropped flat to the mat, rolled inside my guard, and before I could adjust, she had wrapped herself around my forward right leg in a configuration I did not immediately recognize. Then she twisted, and suddenly there was pressure on my joint that should not have been possible. I attempted to pull free. The pressure increased. I shifted my weight distribution to compensate. She shifted with me, maintaining that cursed grip like a parasitic organism designed specifically to annoy larger predators. You are holding my leg, I observed, somewhat unnecessarily. Yep, she grunted, adjusting her position. Heel hook, super effective on joints that bend this way. Want to tap out, or should I keep going? Tap out? Tap out? I have never tapped out in 3 centuries of combat instruction. I am Vorath 9, graduate of the Krellian War Academy, recipient of the Obsidian Claw for excellence in close quarters combat, personal trainer to the Imperial Guard of Zephyra Prime. I wrenched my leg with full force, utilizing strength that could bend steel bars. She released immediately, rolled away, and popped back to her feet, completely unharmed. Okay, she said, breathing slightly harder now. So you're strong. Got it. Round 2. My secondary hearts were pounding with something that might have been respect, but was definitely irritation. You utilized leverage and joint manipulation rather than attempting to match my physical advantages. Well, yeah, Kira said, bouncing lightly on her toes. That's kind of the whole point of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Use technique and physics instead of trying to arm wrestle someone who benches starships. Your species developed an entire martial system around compensating for physical weakness. I found myself genuinely curious now, which was unfortunate, because curiosity led to underestimation, and underestimation led to embarrassment. Pretty much, she agreed. Turns out when you're small and squishy, you get creative about not dying. Who knew? The sarcasm was thick enough to register on atmospheric sensors. I was beginning to understand why humans had such a reputation for being simultaneously infuriating and impossible to eliminate from contested territories. They simply would not accept the reality of their limitations. Very well, I said, recalculating my approach. Let us attempt a different evaluation. The Academy requires all advanced certification candidates to demonstrate defensive capabilities against multiple opponents. You will face me and 2 combat drones simultaneously. If you survive for 3 minutes without sustaining critical injuries, you pass this phase. 3 against 1? That's your idea of fair assessment? She actually had the audacity to look amused rather than terrified. Fair? I clicked in what might have been laughter. Human? Nothing in the galaxy is fair. Combat is not fair. First contact with hostile species is not fair. If you cannot handle 3 opponents in a controlled environment, you will die screaming in the field. This is mercy, though you are too inexperienced to recognize it. Right, tough love, got it. She cracked her knuckles, a gesture that served no functional purpose but apparently made humans feel prepared. Bring on the drones, let's make this interesting. I signaled the control panel, and 2 standard combat drones descended from the ceiling. Each stood 6 feet tall, humanoid in configuration for training purposes, equipped with impact sensors to register successful strikes. They were programmed for intermediate difficulty, which should have been overwhelming for a human with minimal formal training. "Begin," I announced, and activated the simulation. The drones moved with synchronized precision, attacking from opposite angles. Kira dropped low immediately, sliding between them as their strikes crossed through empty air where her torso had been. She came up behind the left drone, jumped onto its back, wrapped her legs around its midsection, and threw her weight backward. The drone, built for stability, nonetheless toppled from the unexpected shift in center of mass. They hit the mat hard and Kira was already moving, using the fallen drone as a launching platform to avoid the second drone's follow-up attack. 20 seconds. I called out, tracking her movement patterns. Fast, efficient, minimal wasted motion. Someone had trained her well, or humans were simply naturally inclined towards survival tactics that appeared insane to more conventional warriors. The drones adapted, shifting to coordinated containment patterns. They circled her, cutting off escape routes, preparing for simultaneous strikes from opposite vectors. Standard anti-infantry tactics. Should have been game over. Kira waited until they committed to their attack, then charged directly at the nearest drone. It braced for impact, arms extended to grapple. She dropped into a slide at the last possible second, passed under its guard, popped up behind it, and used its own body as a shield against the second drone's strike. Metal clanged against metal. The drones recalculated, but Kira had already disengaged, rolling to open mat space. 1 minute, I announced. My estimation of her capabilities was undergoing rapid revision. "You move well for someone who should be dead by now." "Thanks," she called back, dodging another coordinated assault. "I do my best." The sarcasm, even while fighting for her hypothetical life, she maintained that infuriating human humor. It was enough to make my mandibles ache from involuntary clenching. The drones pressed harder, increasing their speed and aggression parameters. This was beyond intermediate difficulty now. This was approaching actual combat simulation levels. Kira's movements became more desperate, less calculated. She took a glancing blow to her shoulder, stumbled, barely avoided a follow-up strike that would have registered as critical damage. 2 minutes, I called out. Surely she could not maintain this pace for another 60 seconds. Human endurance was legendary, yes, but there were limits to what flesh and bone could accomplish against tireless machines. Kira's breathing had become ragged, her movements fractionally slower. The drones sensed weakness, closed in for termination. She backed toward the wall, apparently trapped, nowhere left to run. Then she did something I had never seen in 300 cycles of instruction. She ran up the wall, pushed off at the apex, flipped over both drones, landed behind them, and while they were still turning to track her new position, she swept the legs of the nearest drone, used its falling body to trip the second drone, and ended up standing on top of both prone machines, with her hands raised in what I would later learn was called a victory pose. 3 minutes, she announced cheerfully. Do I pass, or should I juggle them for extra credit? I deactivated the drones, my multiple eyes fixed on this impossible, ridiculous, absolutely infuriating human who had just demonstrated combat capabilities that should not have been accessible to someone of her size and species. You pass, I said slowly, each word precisely calculated. Provisionally, but understand this, Voss. What you just accomplished was basic survival. Advanced certification requires significantly more. Tomorrow we begin actual training. Report here at 0600 station time. Wear comfortable clothing that you do not mind destroying. Bring water. Bring pain medication. Bring whatever gods your species prays to, because you will need divine intervention before I am finished with you. Kira wiped sweat from her forehead, still breathing hard, but somehow still managing to look amused rather than appropriately terrified. Looking forward to it, instructor, she said, heading toward the exit. This is going to be fun. Fun? She thought combat training with a 300-year-old warrior instructor was going to be fun. I watched her leave, already recalculating my training protocols. Humans, I was beginning to realize, required an entirely different pedagogical approach than any species I had previously encountered. They did not respond to intimidation the way rational beings should. They did not accept their physical limitations as constraining factors. They simply adapted. It was frustrating. It was fascinating. It was going to give me the human equivalent of a headache by the time this certification process concluded. I returned to my office, pulled up her file again and began making notes. Supplementary training modules would be required. Psychological evaluation might be necessary, and I would definitely need to requisition additional repair materials for training equipment, because something told me that Kira Voss was going to break several dozen expensive things before this was finished. Tomorrow would be interesting, possibly painful, definitely memorable. I found myself looking forward to it, which was perhaps the most disturbing realization of the entire encounter. Humans. Why did it always have to be humans? Morning on Station Helix 7 arrives with all the gentle ambience of a gravitational collapse, meaning there is no sunrise, no natural transition from darkness to light, just the sudden activation of overhead illumination panels that turn night into day, with bureaucratic indifference. I arrived at the training hall at 0500, a full hour before our scheduled session, because preparation is the difference between victory and humiliation. Also, I needed time to set up what I privately called the humility protocol. 17 reinforced training drones, check. Gravitational field manipulators set to 1.5 Earth standard, check. Environmental hazards including electrified floor panels, rotating obstacles and random projectile launchers, check. Medical drone on standby with tissue regeneration gel and bone knitters, check. If Kira Voss wanted advanced certification, she would earn every microscopic increment of approval. At precisely 0559 she walked through the training hall entrance, carrying a water container and wearing a sleeveless training outfit that revealed arms considerably more muscular than I had initially assessed. Her hair was braided back in a complex pattern that probably served some functional purpose humans found meaningful. "Morning, instructor," she said, surveying the modified training environment with an expression that might have been concern, but looked suspiciously like excitement. "Wow, you really went all out with the decorations. Should I be flattered or terrified?" "You should be focused," I replied, activating the environmental controls. The gravity increased immediately, and I watched with satisfaction as Kira's knees buckled slightly before she adjusted her posture to compensate. "Today we evaluate your capability under adverse conditions. Many species you will encounter as a scout possess natural advantages: heavier gravity, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures. You must demonstrate adaptability." "Right, because fighting robots in normal gravity was too easy," she muttered, but she was already moving, testing her range of motion under increased gravitational load. "What's the challenge?" "Survive 30 minutes. I said simply. "Drones will attack in waves of increasing difficulty. Environmental hazards activate randomly. Gravity may fluctuate. Your objective is simple survival without sustaining injuries that would be fatal in field conditions." "And if I do sustain fatal injuries?" she asked, with that maddening human tendency to joke about mortality. "The medical drone will stabilize you. We will discuss your performance deficiencies, and you will attempt again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, until you either succeed or request transfer to a less demanding certification track." I paused, letting my mandibles click thoughtfully. "Most humans choose transfer by day 4. "Good thing I'm not most humans," Kira said, rolling her shoulders despite the increased gravity making the gesture visibly more difficult. "Let's do this." I activated the protocol. 3 drones descended immediately, moving faster than yesterday's units, optimized for the heavier gravity. Kira moved to engage, and I could see the increased gravitational field affecting her speed. What had been graceful dodging yesterday became calculated, economical movement. She was conserving energy, smart. The first drone reached her. She deflected its strike, attempted a counter, but the increased gravity made her usual mobility impossible. The drone's follow-up caught her in the ribs, sensors registering what would have been a cracked rib under real combat conditions. "Injury registered," I announced. "Continue." She grimaced, adjusted her strategy. Instead of trying to maintain distance, she moved inside the drone's reach, where their longer limbs became disadvantageous. Close quarters grappling, using their own mass against them in the heavy gravity. Clever adaptation. 2 more drones joined the engagement, 5 opponents now, all coordinating their attacks with mechanical precision. Kira was breathing hard, sweat already soaking through her training outfit. The increased gravity was exhausting her faster than normal combat. Then the floor panels activated. The section of mat where Kira had been standing lit up with electrical charge. She leaped away straight into the attack range of 2 drones. One caught her shoulder, spinning her around, the other swept her legs. She hit the mat hard, sensors screaming critical impact warnings. That would have been fatal, I observed, genuinely disappointed. We had barely passed 8 minutes. Your awareness of environmental hazards requires significant improvement. But Kira was already rolling to her feet, ignoring what should have been debilitating pain from the simulated injuries. Again, she said, breathing hard. Run it again. You wish to immediately retry after catastrophic failure? I was genuinely surprised. Most species required recovery time, psychological evaluation, gradual reintroduction to training protocols. Yeah, she said, limping slightly but maintaining her fighting stance. I see where I messed up. The electrical panels have a 2-second warning glow before activation. I can use that. And I was treating the drones like separate opponents instead of a coordinated unit. Give me another shot. I deactivated the drones, reset the environmental hazards, and found myself experiencing something uncomfortably close to respect. Very well, but understand, human, the difficulty will not decrease simply because you request additional attempts. Wouldn't want it to, she said, and somehow she was smiling despite the pain and exhaustion and complete failure of her first attempt. We ran the protocol 6 more times that morning. 6 times, she failed. Electrical burns, simulated broken bones, gravitational disorientation, drone-inflicted injuries that would have killed or crippled most organic beings. Each time she got back up. Each time she analyzed her mistakes. Each time she lasted slightly longer. By attempt 7, she made it to 23 minutes before a coordinated drone assault finally overwhelmed her defenses. Enough, I finally announced, deactivating everything. You have reached your physical limits for today. Medical drone will treat your injuries. Return tomorrow at the same time. Kira was sitting on the mat covered in sweat, breathing like a malfunctioning atmospheric processor, but still somehow maintaining that expression of determined satisfaction. Tomorrow I'll hit 30 minutes, she said. I'm getting the timing down. Your confidence continues to exceed your capabilities, I observed, but there was less criticism in my tone than there had been yesterday. However, your adaptation rate is acceptable for a human. I'll take it, she said, accepting help from the medical drone to stand. Hey instructor, thanks for not going easy on me. A lot of the other trainers, they see human and they either dismiss us completely or overcompensate with kid gloves. You're just straightforward about breaking us down to build us better. I appreciate that. I had no response prepared for genuine gratitude. It was not an emotion I frequently encountered from trainees who I had spent the morning systematically demolishing. You are welcome. The translator made it sound like a question, which accurately reflected my uncertainty. She laughed. Actually laughed, despite her injuries. See you tomorrow, instructor. This is going to be great. Great. She thought, repeated physical punishment and failure was great. Humans, I was learning, possessed a fundamental psychological deviation from rational species. They seemed to interpret suffering as challenge, failure as opportunity, and pain as merely temporary inconvenience. It was absolutely inefficient, completely illogical, and somehow remarkably effective. The next 17 days followed similar patterns. Kira would arrive early. I would design increasingly difficult scenarios. She would fail repeatedly, adapt constantly, and somehow maintain that infuriating optimism throughout the entire process. By day 12, she successfully completed the 30-minute survival challenge. By day 15 she completed it without sustaining critical injuries. By day 18 she completed it efficiently enough that I had to increase the difficulty parameters 3 times mid-session just to provide adequate challenge. Other instructors began noticing. They would stop by the training hall, observe this small human doing things that should not have been possible, and leave with expressions of confusion that I found deeply satisfying. Yes, my student was exceptional. Yes, she made your elite warriors look inefficient by comparison. No, I was not available to discuss my training methodology. On day 19, everything changed. I had decided to introduce direct instructor engagement. No more drones. No more environmental hazards. Just me, utilizing my full 3 centuries of combat experience against one human who had been training for less than 3 weeks. Today we fight, I announced when Kira arrived. No assistance, no safety protocols beyond basic medical monitoring. You against me. Objective: force me to submit or disable me for 10 seconds. Achieve this, and you pass advanced certification. Kira's eyes widened slightly. You're serious? Full contact sparring with no restrictions? Fully serious, I confirmed. You have demonstrated capability against drones and environmental challenges. Now you must prove yourself against a thinking opponent with vastly superior physical advantages. This is the final test. Okay, she said slowly, and for the first time since we began training, she looked genuinely nervous. Good. Nervous meant cautious. Cautious meant she would not do anything spectacularly stupid. I should have known better. We began circling each other, both evaluating, both calculating optimal approaches. I had size, strength, reach, armored exoskeleton, multiple limbs, and 300 years of experience. She had adaptation, creativity, technique, and apparently zero survival instinct. She attacked first, coming in low with a leg sweep that I easily avoided. I countered with a grappling claw aimed at her shoulder. She rolled under it, came up inside my guard, and suddenly her hands were on my forward right leg again, attempting that same joint manipulation from our first encounter. I was prepared this time. I shifted my weight, lifted the targeted leg while sweeping at her with my middle appendage. She released, flipped backward, landed in a crouch. Nice adaptation, she said, breathing controlled. You learned from last time. As did you, I acknowledged, pressing forward. My multiple limbs created a cage of potential strikes, limiting her movement options. She had to commit to a direction eventually, and when she did, I would be ready. She feinted left, dove right, came up with a strike aimed at the joint between my thorax and abdomen. I blocked with my rear leg, countered with my foreclaw. She took the hit on her shoulder, accepting the damage to get inside my reach again. And then she did something I had not anticipated. She grabbed my wrist, the primary manipulator limb, and twisted. Not hard, not aggressively, just a precise rotation that suddenly put my entire joint structure at a mechanical disadvantage. I attempted to pull free. The pressure increased. I attempted to strike with my other limbs. She moved with me, maintaining that grip, keeping me off balance. What are you doing? I demanded, suddenly very aware that my supposedly superior position had somehow become compromised. Wrist lock, she explained conversationally, continuing to apply pressure. Well, technically it's your equivalent of a wrist. Same principle though. Control the joint, control the whole limb. Control the limb, control the body. I attempted to break the hold using strength. She adjusted her angle, and suddenly there was pain, actual pain, shooting through my primary manipulator. I attempted to compensate with my other limbs. She somehow anticipated each movement, maintaining that cursed grip, no matter what I did. You cannot possibly maintain this, I insisted, even as the evidence contradicted my statement. I have 6 other limbs. Yeah, but you need this one for balance, she said. And then she did something with her hip placement, and suddenly I was falling forward, my own mass working against me. I hit the mat in a controlled fall, but she never released that grip, and now she had leverage, real leverage. The kind that made my joint sensors scream warnings about structural compromise. My knees, both anterior and middle pairs, buckled. Not from weakness, but from the cascading mechanical disadvantage of having my primary support limb compromised. I was kneeling, actually kneeling, brought down by a creature 1/5 my mass using nothing but applied physics and ruthless precision. "Submit," Kira said, and there was no gloating in her voice, just professional assessment. "I can break this joint if I apply more pressure." "You know I can." "Submit, instructor." For 3 seconds, pride warred with rationality. I was Voroth 9. I had trained Imperial Guards. I had never submitted to a trainee in 300 cycles, but I was also a professional, and professionals recognize when they have been legitimately defeated. "I submit," I said, and the translator made my mandible clicks sound appropriately humiliated. Kira released immediately, stepped back, offered me a hand to help me up. A hand. As if I needed assistance from someone who had just systematically dismantled my combat superiority. I ignored the offered hand, rose to my full height, and found myself staring at this small, exhausted, absolutely impossible human who had just accomplished something no trainee had ever done before. "Good boy," she said, and then immediately looked horrified. "Oh no, that just came out. I'm so sorry, that was totally inappropriate. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I just say that sometimes when training goes well—" "You called me a good boy," I interrupted, my mandibles clicking in what might have been offense but was actually something closer to bewildered amusement. "I know I'm sorry. It's a human thing. We say it to like dogs and sometimes to people we're training with. And it just slipped out because you took the submission really professionally instead of trying to power through and injure yourself, which shows good training discipline." I held up one claw, stopping her rambling explanation. "You defeated me using technique, leverage and apparently instinctive understanding of joint mechanics across species barriers. You have earned advanced certification. You have also earned the right to call me whatever ridiculous nickname your species finds appropriate." Kira blinked. "Really?" "No," I said flatly. "Call me good boy again and I will schedule additional training sessions focused entirely on electrical endurance. But you have passed certification. Report to administration for your scout program assignment." She actually whooped, a bizarre human vocalization of joy that made my auditory senses ring. "Thank you, instructor. This has been the best training I've ever had. Can I list you as a reference? Can we keep in touch? Can I come back if I need refresher training?" "You may. We can. And please do not," I said, but there was no real rejection in my tone. "Now leave before I remember that you assaulted your instructor and change my evaluation." She left, practically bouncing despite the heavy gravity, somehow still full of energy after 3 weeks of brutal training and a fight that should have left her unconscious. I returned to my office, filed her certification with commendations, and sat in silence for several minutes, processing what had just occurred. A human, barely trained by galactic standards, had submitted me using nothing but technique and physics. She had adapted to every challenge, overcome every obstacle, and maintained positive attitude throughout circumstances that broke most species psychologically, and she had called me good boy. I should have been offended. I should have been humiliated. Instead, I found myself clicking my mandibles in what might have been laughter. 3 days later, I received a message from the Forward Scout Program Director. Kira Voss had been assigned to a first contact team exploring potentially hostile territory in the Outer Rim. High danger, low survival probability. Perfect assignment for someone with her specific combination of skills and psychological deviation from sanity. I sent her a brief message. "Do not die stupidly. Your species has few enough competent warriors, Instructor Voroth 9. Her response arrived 6 hours later. "Will do my best. Thanks for everything, good boy." I stared at that message for a full minute before deleting it with what I told myself was irritation, but might have been something uncomfortably close to pride. Humans. Absolutely impossible. Completely infuriating. Occasionally impressive. I began reviewing applications for next cycle's advanced certification candidates, and found myself hoping, just slightly, that more humans would apply. Not because I enjoyed training them, obviously, but because the galaxy needed more warriors who responded to overwhelming odds with sarcasm, adaptation, and apparently the ability to call superior officers pet names without consequence. Also, I had developed several new training protocols specifically designed for small species with disproportionate confidence, and it would be wasteful not to utilize them. Station Helix 7 continued its rotation through the void, training continued according to schedule, and somewhere in the outer rim, a small human scout was probably doing something spectacularly dangerous while maintaining completely inappropriate levels of optimism. The galaxy, I reflected, was never going to know what hit it. And that somehow was exactly as it should be.